to the track, the wall, makes the leap, and makes the catch! Amazing catch by Junior! He got it! A perfect game! 13 strikeouts. And Bonds hits one hard! It's a game! It is out of here! 7:56! What a special moment for Barry Bonds! Swinging a long drive, deep to right, going, goodbye! He has done it! He has changed the game of the night with one swing of his bat!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Champions Adjust podcast. This is episode number 41 of the Champions Adjust podcast. I am Aaron Machbitz. Next to me is Coach David Bodzin.
Gang.
All right, and together we are Champions Adjust. Champions Adjust
is sponsored by.
Well, this podcast, Champions Adjust, is sponsored by
Champions Adjust.
Boom.
Get your apparel at championsadjust.com.
That's right, because Champs Adjust is a podcast, a clothing line, and most importantly, a pitching performance and mindset organization, company, brand, whatever you want to call it. So, bring us to your camps, your clinics, your teams, your organizations, whatever it is. We want to help as many people as we possibly can with however much time allows us to do that. So
yes, and right now we're doing weekly. We're really excited to figure out one hour a week that we can get together and do this.
Yeah, we're shaking and moving.
Yeah, we're shaking, moving and shaking and rolling and rocking.
In the midst of baseball season, practice, things, other work, all that good stuff. So we're back, episode 41. We got a couple little things that we want to talk about, 2 tweets that popped up on our timelines that we thought were interesting conversation topics. Coach Bodzin's going to bring up the first one.
Is it the Schlacker one?
Yes, sir. And then we'll go to the next one.
Let me pull it back up. As you guys know, Michael Schlack and I go way back. Schlacky, if eventually you're going to hear this one, because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to send this episode to you because we're talking about your tweet. I'm going to your page. He is the field manager and baseball ops manager for the Missoula Paddleheads. We'll put that picture up there because that is a great picture of him.
That is nice.
But I've known Schlacky since 2008. So 15 years now.
Long time.
One of the nicest, down-to-earth, just mental health first, performance second kind of guys I've ever met. And he's just a good dude. And so he's also very popular on baseball Twitter, which obviously I follow a lot. He's now up to 41,000 followers. Good God, man. So one of the tweets that popped up is really big for what we do, right? It's what are you doing to be a good teammate? Because you're not always going to perform the way your expectations are, right? And you're not always going to get the playing time you feel you deserve. I know that I coach 13 kids. I have 13 high-level 14U majors kids on my team. And the ones who play outfield and infield will play a lot more than the ones who just play infield or just play outfield. It's just the way it goes.
Right.
I have one guy who's just playing infield and he's going to start playing catcher, which is going to be great because he has the opportunity to get a lot of playing time there. But that to be said, there's always going to be 3 to 4 guys on my bench. One of those will always be my next reliever. The other 3 are basically sitting there thinking, why the heck am I here?
Right.
Right. So here's the tweet. So you weren't in the starting lineup. Now, what can you do to help the team? Start with having a good attitude on the bench. You want to go down these and then talk about it, or do you want to go down the tweet and then talk about it?
Just say all of them.
Okay. Good attitude on the bench. Watch the pitcher's tendencies. Try to pick up the signs. Now, that means go look at the other coach and try to see if you can pick their signs. Be ruthlessly positive. Be just the first guy off the bench and just congratulating everybody. Stay locked in and ready because you never know when you're going to get your opportunity to go into the game. Talk situations with teammates. Teammates that are on the bench. You shouldn't be talking about your girls or fishing or what your fantasy baseball team is doing. You should be talking about the situation, what you would be doing. Those are your mental reps. And ultimately, that goes right into studying the game. When you're on the bench, you have an opportunity to watch the game from a perspective that you don't get when you're the starting shortstop and you're focused on every single play on what you would do. You have the opportunity to sit there and say, hey, runners on first and second, I see the left fielder shading this way. What should I do? What would I do? Why are they doing this? study the game. So I'm going to go first with good attitude on the bench. Guys, good attitude on the bench goes right with be ruthlessly positive. I was, as everybody knows, a PO my last 2 years of high school. I played well at second and right. I could not hit. I was a PO. I was a Friday night starter, which means that Saturdays and Sundays for big tournaments and Tuesdays, I was on the bench. And there was nobody who was more fired up after a good inning. I was the first one off the bench. I was the last one back on the bench. I was cheering on my teammates. I was helping align people. Having a good attitude and being ruthlessly positive, understanding your role. Your role is still being a part of the team and being a good teammate when you're on the bench. You might not be on the field, but you are still an important part of this team because, yeah, there's a good chance if you're playing for me, you're still hitting. Mm-hmm. But even if you're not, your role is to lift up the team chemistry in the atmosphere. Anything on be ruthlessly positive or good attitude on the bench?
I want to say that this is not easy.
It's not.
I'll give you a personal example for me. So from like my junior year of high school on all the way to the end of my career, I didn't really sit very often. I got pretty good. So when I did sit, I did not have this attitude.
Sure.
In college, it was a little different because I usually sat on like midweek games or games against non-Division I opponents,
sure,
not in the big games.
Sure.
And so I say that to say, if it does happen to you, there's an initial reaction that happens when you get put on the bench that you basically have to decide in that moment what type of person you want to be. And so this doesn't just come out of thin air, right? The coach doesn't walk up to you and be like, he's not going to baby you. He's not going to coddle you. He's going to be like, hey, Jimmy, you're not going to play tonight because of this, and this. This is, and of course, in youth. I'm talking about
I go to somebody, hey, you're sitting, and this is exactly why.
When you get into high school and when you get into college, it's not going to happen.
Never going to know. Never going to know.
And so you can assume, you can catastrophize, you can play all these scenarios out in your head. And maybe that's important so you can figure out where you might have went wrong and what you could do differently next time to ensure that you might be in the starting lineup. But you don't do that in the midst of the baseball game. Just like you don't, after a strikeout, start thinking about what went wrong. You just continue to play the game, try to settle back into the present moment, and be the player you can be. And then post-game, you reflect. This is the same thing about sitting on the bench. Yes, you look at the starting lineup and you don't see your name listed. You don't know why. You feel like you've done everything right. You have to let all of that go and be like, I am still a part of this team, and I'm making a commitment for the next 2 hours to be locked in the game and do everything I can. Because good quality coaches will look at you, will look at the intangibles you bring to the team, and will look at how you handle adversity. It may be that you've been playing great, but this coach just wants to test you real quick. Okay, so what if I sit this guy on the bench? How is he going to respond? Is he really a team guy? Or is he just I want to get good numbers guy? So everything all the time is being watched. And yes, that may seem like very anxiety inducing because you try to have to be perfect all the time. It's not about being perfect. It's just about presenting yourself in this positive mental framework because you have that choice to do that. So we can't only visualize ourselves doing great things. We have to visualize ourselves overcoming obstacles.
Yes.
And then overcoming an obstacle, especially as a high school baseball player, is sitting on the bench. And how you respond to that moment is everything. So be in the game. You don't have to be a fake pretend cheerleader. No. That's not what anyone wants. No one in high school.
Be a good teammate if you can be.
But be a good teammate.
Yeah,
hype up your boys. Yes. Talk to them. High five them. Don't say fake.
Oh yeah, it's okay. You struck out. More of a, hey dude, you fucking pieced that.
Right.
Let's go.
Well, that was a good swing on 0-2 or way to battle or whatever the case may be.
Let's hit this. And then go tell the other guys because it's like, hey, your role right now is to be basically, the way I look at my bench players is you're another coach right now. Here's a pitch clock. Here's your pitch count. Here's a stopwatch.
Right.
I want you charting this. I want you watching this. You have a role right now on the bench. And your role on top of that is if you see something, say something. Like, hey, that dude just pieced it. Hey, Jimmy, what'd you see? Oh, it was a fastball in. He tried to go break the ball out and fastball in. His fastball didn't really have a lot of movement. Hey, everybody, did you hear that? Hey, everybody. Jimmy just said he pieced an inside fastball, had no movement on a 1-0 after a breaking ball. That's what he's probably going to throw, right? And then that's just being a great teammate. And that's being ruthlessly positive.
Right.
That is having a good attitude on the bench. And that's studying the game. Because that goes right into what's next, which is watching the pitcher tendencies.
Is huge.
Because when you're in the game, you look at the game one way. When you're not, if you know the game and you're watching on TV, you're watching from the stand, you're watching from the bench, you see a different side of the game that I, as a coach, can't see. And the players who are playing cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
But the player on the bench who's a little bit more relaxed and is analyzing it in a different way, they can see that.
Right.
And they can look at that, and that's how they can be a good teammate. And to that point, try to pick the signs.
That's all just about being in the game.
Last year, my favorite part about the Navy team was Max Bachman. When he was hurt, he would sit on the bench and he would just sit there and watch the signs and figure out what's going on. By the second inning, he had all the signs picked.
Mm-hmm. He's a smart kid.
Smart, very smart kid. So those of you who are listening to this who have a 3.5 or above in 8th grade, that's your rule.
This is interesting because when I became a professional wrestler and I started doing matches and traveling the world and all this stuff, the way I watched wrestling was completely different.
Sure.
No longer could I watch it as a fan. I was watching as a student of the game.
Yes.
Just like we're trying to get you guys to do here. I was watching why they did certain moves in certain moments, why they got the fans to react the way they did, how they did this move, their facial reactions, their movement, their timing, their pacing. All of that then I took into my matches to try to replicate it or do it as consistently great as those on TV. So then I could get the same crowd reactions, the same momentum, the same build as them. And it's the same thing as a young baseball player, right? Not all the time, if you watch Major League Baseball, do they play the game the right way because they're making $30 million. Sometimes they don't hustle, sometimes they don't run, but they have a sharp, fluid smoothness to them, which is how we want to play the game. But if you're studying a college baseball game, those guys go hard. Those guys play the game right. They dive, they slide, they move, they hustle, they're aggressive on the base pass. The teams are trying to pick up signs because they want any little advantage they can against the number 1 ranked team in the world or their other SEC opponent or whatever the case may be. So if you are on the bench, because the biggest problem with young kids, like 10 to 15 probably, is that they don't know a lot about the game of baseball.
Right.
Yes, you've been playing the game for 5 years, but there's so much to learn about baseball that in that 5-year span, you've grasped a lot, but you've also lost a lot because it's hard to be a sponge on every little thing that's said to you. Like Coach Bodzin and I are still trying to learn about baseball. Now that we coach it, we have to know it even better.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's your chance to really understand the game the best you can. So when you're on the field, no situation surprises you. No count surprises you. Nothing surprises you like, oh, I saw this 2 days ago when I was sitting on the bench and I was studying the game. Now I know I can do it. And so that's why studying the game, paying attention to the pitcher, the tendencies, the outs, the counts, the release point, all of that stuff, you just put in your toolkit to become the best baseball player you can. Because maybe you're a freshman and you're on the JV squad and you're just sitting that year. Yeah. Right? You're getting to practice with the team, you're getting to elevate your game, but you're studying that. So now when you're a sophomore, you understand the speed of the game and the pace, and it's not surprising to you at all. And then by your junior year on varsity and nothing's a surprise, you're crushing it, you're cruising, and you're still in that same atmosphere. So I think that's why it's important.
And I agreed. And that's what we've already talked about, studying the game and talking situations with teammates as a result of that. There's one last thing that's really big to this, is if you're not in the game and you're on the bench right now, stay locked in and ready. You have to be locked in and ready. I will say this, I've said this to my players before, I'll say it to them again, and I'll say it to you right now. If you're on the bench and I ask you, hey, can you do this? And I catch you by surprise, or like, I don't know, okay, never mind. Never mind. Like, hey, Jimmy, could you make that play that came to you? Like, what would you do? I mean, well, what happened? Yeah, exactly. That's why you're on the bench.
Right.
Like, I want to put you in the game. I wanted to put you in the game. I literally looked at you and asked you a question, hoping you would get it right because I want to make this switch.
Right.
It would be better for everybody if you were at that position next inning. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to be there because you weren't paying attention. And I cannot have you in the field to pay attention, expect you to pay attention here if you're not going to give your best effort on the bench during the game.
Right.
There's 3 of you. There's not a lot going on in the bench. Especially with me as coach, I know for a fact you're locked in because I get pissed if you're not. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, focus up.
Right.
Know the situation, stay locked in and ready because I am expecting you to be ready next inning, even if it's 3 innings in a row that you're locked in and ready for the next inning. Because I promise you, somewhere in my head, I'm trying to get you into the game. I just don't know where or how yet. And it depends on the situation. Because you know how my brain works. Every pitch that's thrown, a different situation pops in my head. I start thinking about other things.
Right.
A pitcher can throw 3 balls in a row, and I'm like, okay, who's next? Like if this continues. Not fair to the pitcher because that stuff happens all the time, but it's how my brain works.
Right.
So now I got runners on first and second and 2 outs, and I have an error in right field. I'm thinking, okay, I can bring this next pitcher in, but that's going to shift my defense. And I have 3 guys on the bench, and I want to get them all in. Where can they go? And this is going to be a best opportunity for everybody because it's going to be a better defense for this specific pitcher that's coming in next. But if you're not locked in and ready, you're not getting in the game.
Right.
And I have kept players who I intended on getting in the game on the bench for an entire day before.
For that reason.
For that reason alone. And then I'll get an email, why wasn't Jimmy in the game? I was like, well, I wanted to put him in the game. Here's what happened, and that's why I couldn't put him in the game. Sorry.
That's the facts.
And he knows that. I told him already. Because if I have somebody on the bench, I'm going to tell them exactly why they're on the bench. It could be just because, hey, there's a reason I'm sitting on the bench just to get these guys reps, or they give me a better opportunity to win with this pitcher. Or it could be, hey, you showed up late and you're not going to play today. But I promise you're going to know why.
That's why sitting on the bench can be extremely challenging. Because if you think about it from a focus perspective, being in the game, you don't have to focus for 1 hour and 45 minutes straight. That's the time limit of a youth baseball game.
Right.
You have to focus. If you're on defense, like you redo your focus every 15 seconds. You refocus every 15 seconds. When you're in the dugout, no coach is asking you to get locked in because he knows you're in the game. He's asking the other guys to get locked in who are not in the game.
Right.
So, which means that I have times in the game where I can have breaks in my focus, which allow me to recuperate and revitalize my energy and my focus. But when you're on the bench, you don't have you're not allowed those sorts of breaks.
Right.
Because you're trying your best to pay attention to the right things at the right time, which is what focus is, giving the right amount of attention to the right things at the right time, all of the time.
Right.
So when that moment comes, which you don't know if it will ever come, you're prepared for it. That's why pinch hitting is one of the hardest things to do in the game of baseball, because you have to be ready the whole game. And then your at-bat comes in the 9th inning against the best pitcher on their team, and you have to figure it out.
Yes.
So that's why being on the bench is hard, and it's something that takes skill, and it's something that takes a deliberate commitment to say, I'm going to be locked in. I'm going to be locked in. That doesn't mean not having fun. That doesn't mean not talking to your teammates. That means just being in the game. So when your coach turns around and goes, how many outs, boys? You're like, 2, coach. Simple as that.
Yes.
Because the guys in the field should know that. If they don't know that, they're already taken off.
Yes. And then somebody from the bench who is locked in and ready gets into the game.
Yes. Simple things like that, simple movements like that, like how many outs? What are the guys on? Hey, what was the last pitch you threw to strike the guy out? Oh, he's been using the breaking ball a lot on 2 strikes. Actually, he's pitching a little bit backwards today, so he's using the fastball on 0-2, but he's leading off with the curveball. He's better on the outside corner than the inside corner. These are all little tidbits of information that you can use to gain advantages, and you can do that on the bench, and your coach sees that and your coach hears that. It's not always going to reap a benefit immediately, but when the coach is back in the coach's office and he's talking to the other coaches and he's like, hey, Fred is like, he's teetering a little bit, he hasn't proved everything to us. Well, Jimmy has been in the game, locked in, saying all this stuff, talking to his teammates, being the first one out of the dugout, sprinting to his position, hustling at practice. He's in.
Yes.
He's in.
Absolutely. And I love that.
And they're not going to just give you one chance.
No.
Because they believe in you now. So they're going to give you 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 chances. And so they know that you have sort of something about you that they feel like you've proved, even by not even being on the field. And so that's huge just for your overall ability. And that goes for the workplace too, right? Like you're not going to be on the bench on the workplace, but you might not be in the position you want to be in, or you might not be in the meetings that you think you should be invited to, or you might not be on the phone calls you think you should be to. Okay, what extra stuff can you do to make that happen? It's a personal responsibility. It's no one else's fault. It's your responsibility. You take ownership and you move from that space.
100%.
And so it's all very important. So I really like that tweet. How did that tweet end? Was that it?
That was it. The tweet ended with study the game, which we've been talking about. Study the game. Be a good teammate, guys. See if there's any replies worth looking at. There are 0 replies. So quote tweets that we can discuss, just great advice and that. Yeah. So yeah, the players in the dugout are just as important as the 9 on the field. You better believe it. That's a good one. If you just eat season and cut up, you're going to get benched. Be a good teammate regardless of your role, because you have a role. If you're on the team, you're on the team for a reason.
Right.
Even if your role is a PO, which will happen when you get to high school.
Yeah.
There are going to be guys who, if you're a good pitcher you're an okay hitter, you're going to be a PO at the select level. Maybe not at high school level, but at the select level, you become a PO pretty quick.
Right.
And you're going to have to know your role. And everybody has their role. Hey, you're a pretty good defender, but on Sundays, you don't give my team the best chance with this pitcher on the mound to win games because I know your ability here and I know your ability here. And you're a better fit probably game 2 if we can get there. So we have to get there.
Right.
Doesn't mean you don't have a role.
Right.
You played a ton yesterday because I knew that what was going to happen today. And now your role is to be a good teammate. And mash. Find your pitch and hit it. Get ahead of the count. Always. Don't let 2 strikes go past you before you swing the bat.
Right.
That's always preferable, right? Cool.
Great.
And then with next tweet, I'm actually conversing with him right now over messaging. But Next Level Baseball is another fantastic follow on Twitter who I converse with. He's based out of Tallahassee, Florida, and is a former JUCO recruiting coordinator and MLB scouting supervisor. So I'm willing to bet that he and I have a lot of friends in common just based off that alone. But do you want to read his tweet?
Sure. So it's just a sort of a discussion that they wanted to have on Twitter, and they posted the question to their followers. So it just says, we have a couple kids who overthink every situation on the field, smart kids, 4+ GPA kids. They're quality players, but can't seem to get out of their own way. How have you handled these kids in the past? Any advice? Do you have any initial thoughts on that, Coach Boz?
Let me get back to it. I'm better reading it. Here we go. Yeah, we see this a lot. I have a kid who I coach, right? And I'm not sure if he listens to this, but I'm not going to say his name out of respect for him. But he's a very intellectual kid. And we see this a lot, especially at the youth level. And in high school, too, that if you're smart, especially as a pitcher, it gets really tough to execute when things aren't going well because you are overanalyzing every single pitch. And as we've discussed, what is the most important pitch you're ever going to throw in your life? It is the next pitch. The next pitch is the most important pitch because the pitch before does not matter. Same thing from hitting perspective, same thing from a fielding perspective. You learn what worked and what did not work for you based off what in the past. But if you are just concerned with that error or that strikeout or that walk, you've lost the next play already, right? So you see a lot of the more intellectual kids, like a 4+ GPA. They overthink every situation in the field. They're very smart. They're quality players, but they don't get out of their own way. It's because they're smart kids who overthink every situation, right? Which is where a lot of your training comes into play, right? I'm going to do my best here because it's based off of what I know, but the whole idea of you breathe in for 3 seconds in, you breathe out for 3 seconds out. You're releasing carbon dioxide that's going to naturally relax you, right? Doing that, I make my pitchers, it's called the 3-breath rule. You're going to throw the pitch. Once you get the ball back from the catcher, deep breath. They're going to walk behind the mound. You're just going to kind of, mess with the mound, whatever. Deep breath. Now you're going to get on the rubber. You're going to look for the sign. And when you get the sign and you get the sign you want, you're going to accept it. You're going to shake yes or nod. And then you're going to, as you're coming set, another deep breath. That's 12 seconds. It doesn't take 12 or 15 seconds maybe. You can do that at the major league level with this bullshit pitch clock. Doesn't let anybody, relax at any time ever. And which I'm not anti-pitch clock. I'm anti giving nobody any room to relax. And it takes 12 seconds. Your fielders aren't getting bored, but it ensures that you are relaxed and you're no longer worried about what just happened. You're worried about what's next. And it's also about big picture, small picture. You're not worried about, I need to get this guy out. I need to get this guy, strike this guy out. Oh my God, I walked the last 2 guys. What can I do with this guy? It is microfocus, which is good low strike. Curveball, low and away. Those are the micro focuses that we need to think to get us away from overthinking the situation and narrowing it down to what we're doing right now. And that, to me, has helped the kids. I had a kid who 3 straight bad outings, relative, right? He killed it for 2 outings. Then he just lost it. He walked 8 guys, got pulled. Next outing, walked 4 guys, got pulled. Sat down with him for 2 hours across 2 weeks before his next outing. Talked about mantra, talked about success, relativity, what it means. and he threw 8 strikes out of 24 pitches, 2 walks, 1 out, 1 strikeout. And I gave him a hug. I was like, dude, that's awesome. His buddy, who I do lessons with him at the same time, is like shocked, like 33% strikes. I'm like, yeah, but that's up from 10% strikes, isn't it?
Right.
We're getting better every week.
Mm-hmm.
If you stop overthinking every situation and you are okay mentally, the physical will come.
Right.
But it's the mental that affects your physical, not your physical that affects your mental. Right? I'll give it to you because you're the guru on this.
I mean, you're right. It basically comes down to, if you're not in command of yourself, then you can't be in command of your performance. And how do you get in command of yourself? Well, you first have to get command of your thoughts. That's what it boils down to. Overthinking is about you not being able to control the stuff that enters and exits your mind.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Now, that's much easier said than done. How do you do that? You mentioned one of the tools. It's about breathing.
Yes.
Okay, because our brains can only think one thing at once. Now, it may seem like we can think multiple things at once, but usually what happens is that we secrete one negative thought, man, I can't throw a strike. And that drives us to have 75, 76 thoughts in a row that all seem like multiple thoughts, but one is just coming after another because it was led by this one statement of, I can't throw strikes. And that's secreted 25, 30 more bad thoughts. And now you're spiraling out of control. You're overthinking. You're like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. You're sweating. Your heart's racing. Your pupils are big. Your shoulders just rolled forward. Now everything's sort of falling apart. This is what happens when we don't have command over our thoughts. Now, if we know that I can only think one thing at a time and that I have control over my thoughts, first you have to teach your players that. Because most players think that their brain and their mind is just another thing that happens automatically. But we can only train 3 things: our body, our craft, and our mind. And we do a lot of body and craft training, but we sort of leave the mind up to chance. And so if we can relay to our kids that they actually have much more control over their mind than they think,
yes,
which is their attitude and their effort and their thoughts, then they can start to understand that this overthinking can dissipate once I start to have command over my thoughts. And I have command over my thoughts by first getting in the present moment. How do you get into the present moment? Coach Bodzin already told you, take a deep breath. But just like anything else, if you take a deep breath and you don't actually believe that that deep breath will make you relaxed or that the thing you're doing will actually help, then it will not help. If you're visualizing or using imagery or doing any of these things, and in the back of your mind are like, this shit is stupid, It's fucking dumb, it's never gonna work, it's some woo-woo hocus bullshit,
Sure.
I should be in the cages swinging, then it's never gonna work. But if you actually give it a real try and think, okay, if I actually take a deep breath here, into my nose, out through my mouth, expanding my belly into my diaphragm, and then exhaling very strong, what do I actually feel? Oh, I actually do feel a little bit relaxed.
Yeah.
Now I can control my thoughts. Okay, I want to think one thing. Bodzin mentioned a great thing, those microfocuses. That's what you're trying to think. You can't have a deep breath and think about everything you want to accomplish in this whole inning as a pitcher. Okay, I want to keep the ball low, keep the ball down, release point here, foot strike, lift and go, do this, I got to get this guy out. Now you're overwhelmingly overthinking about the positive, which is also not good. You want to think about these micro moments. I call them the ABCs of focus. Coach Bodzin calls this microfocus. Same exact thing. It's one or two quick things that you can absolutely focus on in the moment. So you've taken that deep breath. Now you want to have command over your thoughts so you don't overthink. So you tell yourself 1 or 2 things very quickly, and then you get on the bump to pitch. So it's foot strike, release point, low and away, play catch, hit the glove. Those things you can control. That means you have command over your thoughts. That means your thoughts aren't negative and they're not spiraling out of control. That means you've moved away from overthinking, because you can't overthink if you only think one thing, because you're in the present moment and you're focused on what's important now. So that's how I would relay it. But the problem with that is I can't do that inside of a game setting, and it's hard to do it at practice also, because at practice you want to do the fundamentals. You want to teach baseball, you want to teach base running or pop-up communication, or all these things that are important. So we have to have sort of this extra layer to be able to focus on our mental.
Right.
That's why there's sports psychologies and mental performance coaches all with MLB teams and college teams, because they've rotated into their culture as another skill set, as a hitting skill, a mental skill, a pitching skill, a fielding skill. And so, yes, you can talk to your players about this, and some of them may understand it and some of them may not. But if you don't make it important, it's not going to be important to them either. If you just throw it out in passing, like, hey, dude, just take a deep breath. You got it. Like, what does that mean to the kid? What does he do? How does he take a deep breath? He's been breathing the whole game. Does he just keep breathing the same way? No, he has to do it differently and with more of a focus on his internal awareness of in through the nose, out through the mouth. So yes, there's tons of things you can do, but you have to make it just as important as the craft and as the body.
Yes.
And once you do that, kids will start to pick it up. Maybe not immediately, but 2 or 3 years down the road, when they're in these pressure-filled situations and they have a big moment or whatever you want to call it, they're like, oh, here's where it is. I control my thoughts.
Yep.
Play catch.
Yes.
Stay loose. Be focused. Take a deep breath.
It's smooth.
And it just starts
smooth.
it starts to become part of your being. It starts to become who you are.
Yep.
Now you know you're a person who knows how to take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
You know you're a person who knows how to say the right things to themselves because I have command over my body, my thoughts, and my craft. So I don't have to overthink about catastrophizing the situation or what if. I'm in the what if phrase of what if it goes right? What if I do a great job? What if I absolutely crush it? Instead of what if it all goes wrong? What if it all goes to shit? I've trained myself to be an optimistic believer in the thoughts that come into my mind. And so that's where I would start with that stuff. And there's much more to talk about it with, but that's sort of
I love it.
how we approach it with the
and this
with
is
the Champions Adjust mindset
is a
program.
lot of what we are, right? It was, yes, we have the Champions Adjust podcast. Yes, we have the apparel, which is always fun. But really the purpose behind Champions Adjust is our mindset program, which you just began with my specific team last night and talked about what is failure. We don't ever say failure. You said it perfectly. You mentioned you're going to have a lot of coaches talk about failure. And you're just going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. But to me, the only way that you fail is by not showing up or just not giving effort, right? That's failure to me. Yeah, you struck out 5 times in a day. Did you swing? Did you have decent at-bats? Was it just a bad day? It's not a failure. It's not even a mistake. That's just baseball.
Right.
You had a day that did not go the way you wanted it to. And I always say the same thing to my kids who have those days. I said it to one of my pitchers who struggled to throw strikes on Sunday. Ended up being the losing pitcher for that. He came off the field and he was in tears. I get it, man. 14 years old, he has high expectations of himself. He's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And told him, I was like, dude, it's the first inning. You have 7 innings in this game at the youth level, 9 at the higher level, right? You have so much time to make an impact in this game. Do not give up now. You did not fail. You just had a tough outing, but you're still going to be back out in the field as soon as I can get you out there. And you're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 at-bats.
Right.
Let's see what you can do there. It's okay. It's not failure. You just made a mistake on the mound by pressing too hard. And now we will regroup and you will help your team in a different capacity.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay. And we've talked about this before. I fucking hate losing. I do. I hate losing. And I hate coaching kids who are okay with losing. But it is okay to lose. It's a big difference, right? I don't like losing, but it's not the end of the world when you do it. You're not going to win every game.
Right.
My goal is to win more than I lose. My goal is to develop as a person, develop as a ball player, to get you ready for the next level, and then win some games. Of course, I don't like losing. I'm a competitive person. I get angry when I lose. It's just how I am. And it's how the kids I coach are as well. And I love that about them. So it's my job to walk them off the ledge and make them understand, yes, you lost, but you played really well. You lost 3-2. They got 1 free run. We got one free run. It evened out. We just did not beat this team. They beat us. We didn't lose to ourselves and we didn't lose the game. They just beat us, and that's okay. And I talk to my kids about that all the time because you talk about breathing and you talk about not focusing on what's next. You're focusing on what happened in the past. And my team's starting to turn a corner. We had a phenomenal game on Sunday, game 1 against a really solid majors level team called the Texas Sticks Red. And we were down 3-1 going into the bottom of the 7th. And we scored 3 runs to win 4-3 at a walk-off. That's 3 weeks in the making of heartbreak losses.
Mm.
You learn from that. There's 2 losses I've seen this year out of our 6 that I'm just like, are you kidding me? The other 4, hey, this is learning. We're getting better.
Mm.
As long as we're getting better when we make those mistakes, it's not a failure. It's a learning experience.
Right. Yep. And it comes from the top.
It does.
If the coach doesn't believe in his words or his actions, then the players won't either. And so that's why Coach Bodzin and I are trying to become as elite as we wish our players to as well. Because that's important. Because we want to be the best coaches we can be. So we're learning and growing and evolving so that we can help our kids learn, grow, and evolve.
How often do you walk into my house when we do this and you see a random baseball game on or like a replay of a game?
Yeah, I mean, that's what my girlfriend saw me texting you yesterday and was like, do you and Bodzin just only talk about baseball all the time? I'm like, yeah, we do.
No, we talk about life too.
I mean, majority of the time.
Well, the reason I think we talk about baseball most of the time is there's such a mental capacity aspect to it. And so you and I get a lot out of talking just baseball because what do we talk about most when we talk about baseball? We don't talk about the X's and O's. We talk about the mindset perspective,
right,
which is our passion. And that helps me get better and it helps you get better.
Right.
And that's life. And yeah, you know what's going on in my life and I know what's going on in your life. We have pretty good ideas because we see each other every single day. But the mindset of baseball, it goes right into the mindset of life.
It's how you handle things.
Yes.
So, all right.
Cool.
Any last minute thoughts, Coach Bodzin?
No, we got big weekends. This weekend you're playing? No, you're not playing this weekend. You're practicing on Sunday. We are playing. We're playing Brad Hopp's team. Remember we played Brad Hopp's team last year and we lost on a Vinny Weber pickoff to first base.
Yeah.
That was a good game, man. So I will be seeing Brad Hopp again this weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing him. And
on your Saturday games?
My Saturday game.
Oh,
we're playing Little Evans. You'll see him too.
Great, I'll be there.
Nice guy. Really nice. We have a lot of mutual friends in common, so it was always fun to coach against him.
We're going to keep being as consistent as possible. So thanks for tuning in, whether it be YouTube or audio. We appreciate you. All information is at champsadjust.com. And always remember, never forget that
Champions Adjust, baby.
Let's go.